All good books are born out of a belief, a partisanship, and a bias. All good books are political in the widest possible sense of the word. They demonstrate a desire to shape ideas, even shape the world. This is a book about an India that has never lent itself easily to any kind of shaping. India is not even a nation in quite the same sense that the world defines nationhood. India is many countries, many ideas, many languages, many ethnicities, many religions, many symbols. But with this amorphous shape-shifting land, constitutionally dubbed as India, that is Bharat, I presume to share my beliefs and my biases. Because some beliefs are non-negotiable. Security is fundamental. It lies at the cellular core of our national well-being. In the 67 years since the birth of the Republic, there have been almost the same number of grave internal and external conflicts. And so it is incumbent on those of us who have been or are in positions of authority to ask ourselves, have we served India? The very first challenge in finding answers is to ask the right questions. This book, this honest search for conclusions, this sifting of truth from untruth is perhaps the very first attempt at surveying independent India's military history in its entirety. India lies at the epicenter of four collapsed empires: the Qing, the Ottoman, the British, and the Soviet. As a consequence, and though we have failed to realize this, the objectives of India's foreign policy are trapped between four lines: the Durand Line, the McMahon Line, the line of control, and the line of actual control. For so long as we remain thus immobilized and strategically confined, our quest for national security will remain unattained. Partition was the first blow to our security. In bargaining for freedom from the British, we forsook our geographic integrity. All three successor states, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, continued to reap the whirlwind of that misbegotten, avoidable vivisection. In 1948, newly independent Pakistan and newly independent India fought their first unnecessary war. Despite India holding all the cards militarily, politically, diplomatically, Pakistan walked away with a third of the territory of Jammu and Kashmir. The Sino-Indian conflict of 1962 was the consequence of cumulative errors and singular woolly-headedness on the part of India's leadership with regard to defining its international borders in the north and the northeast. Never before this had India and China confronted each other in anger. They had a shared history of civilizational exchanges. The conflict of 1962 was a direct consequence of Prime Minister Nehru's baffling carelessness over defining newly independent India's borders, his unilateral tampering with the McMahon Line, and his arbitrary withdrawing and issuing of maps. It was diplomatic errors and military ineptitude that failed India criminally in 1962. India found itself woefully unprepared, leading Nehru to desperately seek US military help, a tragedy for that great champion of non-alignment. This was yet another avoidable conflict, whose reverberations continue to color India's relations with China. Within 15 years of independence, we had created two enemies, one in the east and the other in the west. And 67 years after, we still have no defined border. The dragon seeds of the Bangladesh War of 1971 lay in the Indo-Pak conflict of 65. It led to the Third War between India and Pakistan in less than the first quarter century of their independence. It was a war neither expected nor judged necessary by any of its major players. Yet, a war was fought. Bangladesh was born amidst one of the bloodiest genocides of the 20th century, a fact acknowledged even by the American Consul General Archer Blood. The decades of the 80s were marked by many mutinies and many ill-conceived reprisals. The JP movement occasioned the emergency. The insurgencies in Assam, Punjab, and Sri Lanka challenged our statecraft. Yet, instead of responding in a way that served the larger national interest, the government responded with a kind of internal colonization, deploying the army and taking recourse to Article 356, alienating its citizens. The power of the state does not lie in military alone. There are other elements: persuasive, economic, coercive, diplomatic. The period between March 1999 and December 2001, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister, was a phase of definition, certainty, and new governance. A period also of many trials and betrayals in Indo-Pak relations. The heady elation of the Amritsar-Lahore peace bus was followed immediately by the incursion at Kargil that escalated into war. It was not just the LOC that had been transgressed upon, the territory of trust had been violated. The close of the millennium brought the nightmare that was the Kandahar hostage crisis, the most demanding and emotionally draining experience of my career. How does one choose between two equally valid and relevant moral rights? The new millennium saw the emergence of a new enemy in India, terrorism, as a tool of coercion in the conduct of internal and international relations. The shocking terrorist attack on Parliament in December 2001, the subsequent mobilization of Indian troops for war, the belligerent national clamor for retaliation, the three army chiefs itching to have a crack, as they put it, at teaching Pakistan a lesson. It was a challenge to argue for restraint and to simultaneously deliver to India a sense of achievement in defeating Pakistan diplomatically. These aims were substantially achieved, and the peace process continued. Because to peace, there can be no alternative. While any ex post facto vision may seem a perfect 2020, yet I make no claims of total objectivity or even complete truth. For in any examination of our military history, truth will necessarily have a few inherent angularities. Yet, examine it we must, to learn from, in order to serve India better. And yet, in all this, I find myself returning again and again to a thought. Are there some immutable laws that determine events? Or is it only human decision-making that causes them? I quote St. Augustine, "My Lord, I do not even know what I do not know."